Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. It's lovely and a thrill to be here with you today. I don't know why I've never figured it out, and you know what? I'm not going to, because it's not a big deal. I have something to talk to you about, and it might turn out that you end up hating me and judging me and finding me an absolute miserable piece of humanity. But I feel there isn't too much action in the world, because I read the news, I listen to the news, whatever, I listen to some podcast, and yeah, there are conversations around climate change, there's conversations around this cancel culture, woke culture, disinformation, polarizing events that no one ever sees eye to eye, there's truth being manipulated, all these things. Yeah, it's fine. But I feel it's in a very mediocre, it's a very sort of teenage adolescent phase, you don't see the glamour, the blockbusterish feel to disasters, right? It's very low grade in the sense it's very amateurish. It's kind of it's not that big 80 car pile up on the highway, but it's like one of these hit and runs, these bump and runs, these fender benders. Like with climate change as well, it's not so much change, because I think change needs adversity, right? Change needs a big wham moment where it's like, oh, if climate change is a guy, like, oh shit, he caught his wife banging someone. It's like, that's also okay. That's not as traumatic, right? Maybe he's like, oh shit, like climate got his legs blown off. Like, fuck, his life's never going to be the same. That's change. Or it's more now climate has got his period. Like, oh, it's more like, oh, it's a realization. It's climate phase. It's a new phase in the climate, not change. Change needs to be more glamorous, needs to be more bang, needs more fucking balls to it, right? Like, what happened to the 9.9 earthquakes? What happened to volcanoes erupting, like Pompeii being buried? What happened to the sky following for 700 years? It was just an ash cloud. And we need more of that, man, to fucking take things to the next level. Right now it's more convenient. It's like, oh, climate seeing a therapist, and it's like, it's okay, it'll be okay. They were mean to you by emitting fossil fuels, and you got rejected by humans, but you know what, things will be all right. You guys need to work on it. They're doing their part, at least they seem to be, but they're not going to come through. So you have to work on yourself, climate. You need to come and look from within who you are and what you want to be and what kind of life you want to live. You can't wait for these people, you can't wait for this partner of yours, human beings, to kind of do it all for you, because they might just leave you and walk away. They might go to another place and they will be all alone, and you want to have anything to look forward to in life. So you need to look after yourself. So I feel that's where climate is right now. It's everyone's shouting about it, but nothing major is happening. It's very it's like a documentary. You need it to be like a crazy movie, right? Which you definitely watch. Like, I feel the movies about climate change are more crazy than climate change itself. Yeah, like, what's that one? Deep Impact, or I don't know. There's a lot of shit happening. Yes, you see whales being stranded. You have boats capsizing, crazy stuff, right? But people, it's more like flooding. Okay, you see forest fires, wildfires. But wouldn't you realize that it's change? Like for you in your life, if you got rejected from a job application, or swipe left on Tinder, it's not earth-shattering. Maybe it is for most people now, but it's more like, okay. That's kind of where climate change is. It's like, okay, we're emitting shit into the skies, plastic, okay. Yeah, plastic is that relationship with that chick you had for years, and it's a toxic relationship. You don't want to let go. She doesn't want you anymore, but she's not willing to let go because she's in a comfortable place and she just can't be bothered. So she'd rather keep you off balance and keep you keep you unstable. That way she knows that she can get what she wants from you, but at the same time you are insecure. So it's one of those things. But change is when, like, you know what, you see your parents walking out on your family, or your parents separating or getting divorced, or I don't know, like, you find out like your balls have fallen off. Like, that's change. And until something like that happens, we're not going to take change seriously. I don't know why your balls would fall off, but I'm just giving you an example. These are all metaphoric representations. I'm not actually hoping, or maybe I am. But it's like flooding. Okay, yeah, or the roads are backed up. What if a country disappears when you wake up in the morning? Like, oh, And not even like Vanuatu or something which is already like 1 inch above the water, or the Maldives, but I'm talking about like, or you know, like a city or country which is susceptible to landslides. I'm just saying some place which is just normally sitting there, like Washington DC, or like something which is in the movies, right? Like Texas or Delhi, or who knows, like Rio de Janeiro or Beijing, or I'm just being, you know, absolutely equal representation, all countries, all continents, or like Turkmenistan, like a country, cities, just anything just gets, tomorrow you wake up in the news, there's huge, just nothing there. Crazy, right? Then you would probably be like, what happened there? So I was like, climate change. And you're like, ooh, climate change. Shit, what happened? Well, what happened was, because of the shit we've been doing, the oceans decided to say, fuck you, and spill over and just take back half a continent overnight. There's no 2025, the climate accord, 1 degree will lead to this in 2050, just overnight. In fact, yeah, what happened was a certain number of amphibians came and tied up parts of the country to the ocean, and all the animals got together and said fuck you and dragged this country back into the water. Now it doesn't exist. You heard about Atlantis? Yeah, that happened like many thousands years. This happened last night. Then climate change is change. It's not climate realization, climate reflection, or climate arguments, climate debates. It's change. Something has finally changed, and that's when you start looking at it with a different lens. So I feel we need more of that, like an earthquake which is so crazy that we start spinning in a different orbit. That would be interesting. Or just a part of the earth falls off because it's so heavy, or because we've drilled so much that there's absolutely no core left, that it just literally falls off. Could be the north, could be the south, could be the east. Suddenly you're like, the whole shape of the earth looks different. That's change. Now, if you want to talk about change, you come to me. What's happened in my English? Come to me with that, and I'll listen to you. Don't give me the shit of like, climate accord, 1 degree, 2 degree. Like, fuck you. Okay. Before I get myself in any more trouble with the activists, I need to introduce my guest today. Sarah Hernholm is a former elementary teacher, and she's the founder of Whatever It Takes, an organization that helps teens make sense of business and be exposed to ideas and opportunities of how to run a business at a young age. And they're teenagers, tweens and teens. Sarah and I talk about the education system and how it's conditioning kids just to one outcome, which is the university, the job market, and then finally putting them in a place where they have no exposure to ideas like failure, rejection, how to make sense of a business, and what actually they want to do with the business. So through Sarah's company, a lot of children are exposed at their teenage level to what it means to be an entrepreneur. And we have a fantastic chat, and I really appreciate Sarah being on this podcast. Sarah, if you're listening, thank you. And I'm sure you listening right now will have an extremely fun and interesting listen. So I really appreciate it, as always, you listening to this podcast. And my heart goes out to you with gratitude. And I don't know what else to say, but thank you, my friend. Till the next episode, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I have a lot more lined up for you. So let me know what you think about my idea for the blockbuster climate change event. All right, till next episode, take care of yourself. Goodbye, God bless, and take care of yourself. Cheers. Sarah Hernholm, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Appreciate you being here.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. And I practiced before starting recording, but I always mess up when I hit record. I'm sorry about pronouncing your name wrong up top. But
Not the first one.
Thank you, Sarah, for joining me. And I'm going to ask you something that's been interesting me about our present society and the present landscape when it comes to young adults, teenagers, and children. Could you maybe in context of where we are today with technology, with exposure to information, with the entire dialogue around age and aging, and maybe not aging so much, but can you maybe talk about where we are when it comes to looking at childhood and defining what children are anymore?
There's a lot of questions in there, a lot of different topics. Okay, so you mean in connection to technology or in connection
I think
to...
just with how do we look at children, because at some point we feel like, and sorry for bombarding you with so many ideas.
That's okay,
but
it's good.
I'm confused because when I look at teenagers, at one point they're still 13 or they're still 12 or 14 or whatever the age is. But when you talk to them, they seem like they're almost like these adults who have these opinions, these formed ideas about who they should be and what the world around them should be like. So have we at some point given up too much of our childhood and at the same time not retaining that innocence?
Interesting. Well, I think that's a really good topic, a good thing to chat about. I think we all felt that way as teenagers, though. When I look back to being a teenager, I definitely was full of ideas and opinions and things like that. So I work with teenagers in the work that I do at WIT, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And that's still there, but that was there when I was a teenager. Kind of just this idea, like, you think you're older than you really are. You feel older than you really are. Nobody can really tell you that. We get annoyed when we're teenagers and somebody says, like, you don't know what it's like in the real world, because that's annoying, because you are living in the world. And so you think, what do you mean? This is my real world. School, friends, the drama and the pain that comes with school, friends, trying to get good grades, all those different things. So I think opinionated teenagers, that's here to stay. And I think it's great. I mean, we like to channel that rebellion and those strong opinions into entrepreneurship at WIT. So that part, I don't have an issue with. I think that's good and healthy to challenge authority a little bit and have strong opinions and things like that. Where I would agree with you on is, are we giving our young people enough time to be kids, to be children? And what role does technology play in that? What role does social media play in that? Are they growing up, quote, too quickly because of those things? And I'll just, it's going to make me sound old, but I am. I'm older than the kids, obviously the people that I work for and work with.
Yeah.
I would say yes. I mean, I feel like even in my own peer group, we're saying things like, I'm so glad we didn't grow up with social media, or I'm so glad I was able to go ride my bike around the neighborhood and just come home when it was dark. Or I just we didn't have cell phones, but we still found each other. We'd be out with friends and we wouldn't know we really had missed out on something until Monday morning at school, because you couldn't just log on, go onto your phone and have FOMO because you get to see that there's people hanging out without you, and then get so sad in that moment. So that my personal preference is that I'm grateful I didn't grow up with it. It would have been hard for me to deal with all the things and the pressures that social media brings, even to me as somebody in my 40s. So I think that's challenging for young people. I think being a child should be just preserved as long as possible in terms of just, I don't know why our education system stops teaching kids. We teach them in elementary school. We incorporate the arts, or we teach with music, or we teach in more playful, fun ways. And then all of a sudden they get to middle school or high school and we take away the fun. I don't know why we do that. I think there's ways to bring fun into the classroom and keep learning interesting and engaging. Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting observation when it comes to learning. Why does learning change from something that is enjoyable, which can become a part of your life, which can increase your idea of checking the world around you, curiosity, these kind of things, and then it has to become this quantifiable, measurable kind of system of gauging a person's growth when it comes to the teenage and the later years. When it comes to middle, high school, you have to be tested on what you know. You have to kind of show that this is what I've learned, and as a result, this is kind of how I project that learning. And that the moment that happens, I feel, at least for me, many, many years back, there was that switch of, it's no longer something that I can use in life when it comes to the point I might need it, but I have to show quick returns, and that automatically changes the relationship with learning.
Oh, I totally agree with that. I mean, I wish there's so many things that I wish we would change about the education system. I would love to see more apprenticeships. I would love to see more entrepreneurship in education, or at least entrepreneurial mindset really encouraged in the school, in the classroom. I would love to see permission for young people to explore a topic more deeply and fully. I think a lot of learning can come from that, versus just this like you learn something and then you memorize it and then for the test and then you don't remember it later on. So there's nothing about it that's you've gotten this great like immersive experience. And I think all of us as adults, that's how we like to learn, is like to get super immersed in something and then deep dive into something. And there's no time for a young person to do that. They're forced to go from subject to subject to subject, quiz, test. There's, and then where's the love of learning? And I think we should be cultivating, I think we should be helping create and build with these young people, contributing, people that are contributing members of society for sure, right? We want people that go out and know how to contribute to society and sustain themselves and be able to give back and all those things. And also like have a well-rounded knowledge base and not just this like little tiny bits of each little thing where there's like nothing that's in, end up. So,
and I feel the problem there is that we are creating these people whose mission statement, if you want to call it, is giving to society, or rather being productive members of society. But many of them aren't content as individuals because of they don't know their own value systems, because they're all constantly being pressurized to be someone else or be a certain version of a human being that society accepts or needs. And that's just you can't go on for too long, right? Or you become dejected, or you become stressed, as we see. Mm-hmm. So it's and that's something you mentioned when you spoke about your peer group and that's something I resonate with strongly. Is I'm glad that I didn't have this much exposure to information and networking at my in my teenage years or even my young adult years, because the word pressure is so important, right? Because whether it's the education system, the pressure starts building, right? You start becoming this product that has to go through the system, and you go to high school, then which high school, then which university, what did you study there? Mm-hmm. And then when you come out, which job did you get? And then how much did that job pay? And where are you at that job? And then if you add that now with the pressures of social media, I feel it's great tools, but it's also a lot of pressure of being seen, or where did you go on holiday, or what skills are you learning, because the information is there and now there's no excuse to not use that information. So and that's something I want to ask you, because it kind of ties in sweetly with what it takes. Maybe that's the second part of this, but maybe if you can address what we spoke about, is the pressure of the pressure that comes along with the internet and technology is very hard to digest for a mind that is quite what's the word, easily influenced, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be two sides of the coin, right? I mean, I love that there is this great access to information, because how wonderful for a young person to be able to go online and build a website that's about them, and or even do a skill they can get paid for from the comfort of their home. I mean, that's really cool. So I love that. I also think, gosh, if I was a parent, it'd be pretty, I'd be pretty diligent on the kind of access I was giving to my kids on what they could, have search. But there's also, we all did different versions of that in our generations, of like getting information that we weren't supposed to really get access to at a younger age, and those kind of things. So every generation has a version of that story. Just like now, it's just a lot of access to things. Mm-hmm. And then this like request or expectation on a young person to self-regulate, which is so interesting, that you give them something that's so addictive, the scrolling of Instagram and social media, and then you say, well, you'd have to learn how to just like regulate yourself in just 30 minutes a day. And like, that's it. And adults can barely do that. I have a time limit on my phone, and it's almost like every day it says, limit up. Do you want to bypass the limit? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And so then we're asking.
I know the same thing happened, like the screen time report. and mine
Yes.
popped up on Sunday, and I'm like, that's not me. I wasn't on the iPad for that long. And he's just in
Yeah.
denial. But one
Right.
YouTube after, one thumbnail after, just clicking like a, God.
Yeah. It keeps, and so I think we got to be careful with how judgmental we're going to get with young people when we all deal with we're dealing with the same thing. But I do think that there's wonderful benefits for the access to resources and information for people around the globe that before you just, oh my gosh, I mean, it'd be so hard to get access to that type of information and resources and education. So I really see the benefits of it.
Yeah, earlier it would be like, especially, I remember a couple of instances, like you say you're interested in advertising or something. It wouldn't be, the access to some of the best, information from some of like the stalwarts in that field. It would be, my dad's friend's uncle was in advertising in 1945. Why don't you talk to him about your interests? And it would be, it would be good maybe, but very outdated stuff or very irrelevant. And sometimes you'd be kind of like, oh, you know what? I had an idea of what it might be, but it's totally, because end of the day, it's coming with bias, but it's also coming with a little bit of, their own kind of, whether it's a perception that was influenced, something went right or wrong. So there's a lot of chance to how that information is coming across. But here it's a lot more unadulterated, depending on where you get it.
Yeah. And I think we also have to be careful too, as adults, getting down on the generation or the young people, because we contributed to it. The things that we're complaining about in young people, like we allowed for it.
Yeah.
We built the systems that created it. We get upset that they're not learning valuable information in school, but adults are the ones that set up the school system and have allowed a broken system to continue. And then then they get upset with the product that comes out of that system. So you built the factory, and now you're upset with the product that's coming out of the factory. And instead of going and fixing the factory, you're like getting mad at the product. It's like, what are you doing? Like, your system is broken. And so go back and take the time to fix it. And they don't want to do that. They just don't. I mean, I used to be a public school teacher, and I advocated for change, and I would speak at those Senate hearings, and they would turn off my mic, and it didn't matter because I have a loud voice anyway, and I would keep talking. But even in that, statement of using my voice and trying to be heard, I wasn't. They didn't care. They still move things forward, because you find out that the people that are the elected officials have been bought by the unions and by people. And so they're not going to go put the kid first. Like, they're just not. And anybody who's claiming that they put kids first is lying, because I don't see it. I mean, that's a broad statement. So I can only imagine somebody would write in or like comment on your podcast and say, well, my 5th grade teacher cares about kids, and so she does. And you're right, there are those, and as a whole, the system is broken, and it's broken because adults have allowed it to be broken because they don't care enough about children.
And it's a bit not scary, but it's a bit sad to hear that. But it's the truth, like even you hear conversations now where in an emerging sort of economy with a lot of money and a lot of people who want, their children to get the best education. So you have all these schools, these international schools, curriculums that are coming in from wherever they come from. But it's still fundamentally, you might say, the programs, like, typically the traditional programs in India were different. They were called the ICSE, the CBSE, the state board. But now, of course, you have the A levels program, then you have the IG program, wherever but which is good. And then, of course, you have the Montessori systems. You have all these new things at a younger age. But the mindset is still broken. It's still the same. It's still the outcome based appreciation of why kids go to school. Okay, they might not go in uniform. Some of them might go, oh, they had yoga at noon, and they had a vegan salad for lunch. But I'm saying that the points that you measure the experience at school is very, very shallow. the time, I mean, and what you said is true, because do we really care enough? Because yeah, we might, that one teacher who changed your life or changed my life does exist, and you might have been that teacher for many children. But if the system is broke, what do you're fighting an uphill battle, right? Because you can, and I remember having great teachers, but they still at the end of the class would say, hey, I'm glad we had this lovely discussion about maybe, political science and a certain thing. But you know what? You have to do that homework and memorize that part, because that's what's going to be tested in the exam. And that's all they can do, because the exam is so outdated. And even something like SATs, I mean, I hate standardized testing, but you have to put a child through that if you want to get them to the next level, because then your other option is homeschooling, right? And then you suddenly say, oh, you know what? You're homeschooled for 18 years of your life, but wait, you need to get a job. How do you get a job? To go through the system again, or something like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm not opposed to homeschooling at all. And I think that there's actually been a really great, I don't know if rebirth is the right word, but a lot of people are upset with the current, in the United States, the current education system, and even what happened during the pandemic and how kids were treated during that, and how schools closed down and didn't support children. And then when they reopened, what a beautiful time to have come back and done things better. I really hoped that, I thought, wow, could this be something where this horrible thing happens where the schools are shut down, but it gives them time to actually come back better and stronger, and in a more present day version of education that is beneficial to our society today versus the archaic way. That didn't happen for the most part. I know there's an exception to every rule. And I would be happy to hear from a listener about a great school that did that, or a great teacher. Please, I say that sincerely, let me know who they are. I do write on the Today Show, and I do write a Forbes column, and I want to write about people that are doing wonderful things in education that are innovative and exciting. And so if you know those people, send them my way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
That's not the norm. The norm was we came back, we opened up the schools, and we didn't meet the needs of the kids. And that's why you see them socially stunted. And that's why you see them behind in their learning and development and in their emotional intelligence. And so that's a problem. And so you see adults go, the school system isn't doing what it's supposed to do for my kids. I'm going to look at this homeschooling option. And so there's a lot of people that have decided to take that route. And that means some really innovative programming in homeschooling is coming out versus maybe what people kind of think homeschooling is from the olden days type of thing. There's really some really interesting curriculums and communities that are coming out of this desire for parents to want better for their kids, and deciding if they're not going to give it to me, then I'm going to do it myself. Also, taking away school choice is ridiculous in my opinion. And so if you're going to take away all these choices, then the parents are going to leave, and they should. The hard thing there, though, is that's where you start seeing an issue with socioeconomics, right? Because I'm sure there's people who wish they could homeschool their kid, but they need to go to work, and they got to pay the rent, and they got to get food on the table, or they got to pay the mortgage, or they got to do something. And there isn't and I want to be careful how I say this, but there isn't that maybe luxury or option for a parent to be homeschooling, especially if you're in a single parent household, although maybe now there's more communities that support in that way, but it's tough. But I'm grateful that there's so many parents that have decided that they're going to do better for their kids, or they're going to push back in the schools, and they're going to start showing up to the school board meetings and say this is unacceptable. We want this, we want that. I mean, that's where the change is going to happen, when the parents really use their voices. And I love seeing parents do that. Yeah,
because, and also, I have my daughter's going to turn 1 tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, so I'm just, I know she's many years away from school, but I'm already that parent, but I don't want to be that parent, who's every teacher's nightmare.
Yes, we all know what you mean to say it that way.
Yeah, that the teachers are like, oh God, here he comes. The crazed, the maniacal tone. But there's this thing that bothers me, which I want to sort of understand. And because one thing is homeschooling, right? Like, I encourage the idea in my head. I have this thing of, me being this amazing homeschool person, and my child comes out well-rounded. But just the idea, like, where do you start, right? What can I think? Because then again, you don't want to go down to the same textbooks that the schools are teaching, or the same thing that you were taught, right? Okay, today we're going to do maths tables, like memorize 2 times 2, 2 times 2, 12 times 12, or whatever. Or then let's just do cursive writing, and then again become the problem that you're trying to get the kid away from.
Yeah.
So
What's
that's
interesting when you said the cursive writing,
Yeah.
they're not teaching cursive. And so now young people can't read like the original documents of this country because they don't know how to read cursive.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know
So
that was
that's
a
an
relevant
interesting
point,
thing that we
because I just said
decided to
cursive
do.
because it is a nightmare for me because of my eyesight. I couldn't connect the things, the C's and the A's. I didn't know which part to connect it from. So I was
But
horrible.
isn't that interesting that people, like, when you don't teach something, they can't read the original documents now? And
That's so
because they were saying, well, they don't need to know that because there's computers now and they're typing, and I'm like, but okay, all right, interesting. So
what a strange thing is that that document is the physical proof that that particular agreement is the reason why a country is formed. Now, it of course exists in the digital space, and I'm totally for digitalization of content because I can read it through screen readers. But it also can lead to scope for manipulation. Now, in 200 years, if the original documents don't exist, someone can manipulate that document, and the country that that document is created as a result out of can be changed, right?
yeah, they're not
Thing.
going to know that the word was changed.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
can't read the original word.
That's crazy.
So that's an interesting
Yeah.
thing. I mean, I didn't enjoy teaching cursive in school. I used to be a teacher. I didn't enjoy that, nor did I enjoy learning it.
Yeah.
Although, because I practice it over and over again. But I think it's important. So that little things like that. I mean, we look
And
at,
it looked pretty. I remember, as seeing
it does.
some of these people with good cursive writing. I'm like, you get those people to write your Valentine's cards, right?
Yes, exactly.
No one asked me. Mine looked like a death threat.
That's funny.
But anyhow, I want to, because this thing that I said that bothers me, right, is this idea of looking at kids and constantly trying to make them better. Like, kids, I'm sure you've had these parent-teacher meetings where you give this update, if you don't call it a report on the child, and she's enjoying class, she likes listening, she's friendly, and you give a bunch of updates which are positive or which are accurate. And I'm sure then the parents are like, but why isn't she doing better at math? Or why isn't she more engaged in science? So why are we like that? I don't have
Well, I do wonder that, because I've done that. Those would be like the parent teacher conferences. And when I was teaching elementary school, I would have the student there and I would have the student lead the conference. And
Okay.
I would have the student talk about the areas that they were doing well in and the areas that they were going to improve on, and provide a plan for how they were going to improve on that. And when a child does that, what's the parent going to do with that? They'll talk if the child was, although I was going to say, if a child's not there, they'll talk differently. And that is true. Like, they would sometimes be like, why isn't she doing this? But I've actually had parent conferences when a parent started talking negatively about their child in front of them. So I had to get involved in that, because that's unacceptable. That just berating a child in that way. But what the reason that I had the meetings ran that way was because I found it was really important for a parent to see a child celebrate where they were doing well, acknowledge where there needed to be improvement, and then present like 3 steps that they were going to do it better. Because what a wonderful thing for a human being to learn how to do. Then that's takes away the conversation, the typical conversation of teacher parent. That's like, well, why aren't they doing better in math? And what should we be doing at home? And like, put that on their child to reflect in a positive way of like, wait, I can have control over this. Like, I would talk to kids like, you don't have to love math. I'm not asking you to love it. I'm not asking you to love science. I'm not saying it has to be your favorite subject, but there's certain things that you need to do. And that's just what it is. And that's in life in general. I mean, all of us, I've created a job that I love, and there's things about my job I don't like.
Yeah.
Now, what am I do? Throw a tantrum and like not do it? I mean, I don't want to raise kids in my classroom that think that just because they don't like something, they don't have to do it. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's not life.
Yeah.
Or I want them to learn that like sometimes things are hard and sometimes you have to dig deeper, and that's how you build grit and like a little bit more resilience. So I don't mind the conversation about how to be better.
Yeah.
I just don't believe in a conversation around like berating somebody or trying to get somebody to be quote perfect, because that's impossible. And
or even normal, right? There's no such thing.
Yeah. And I just also don't agree with parents who speak to their child in a way that they didn't like being spoken to when they were a kid. Because a lot of the stuff that I see is just parents projecting onto their child their trauma or their stuff that like, that's how maybe they were talked to, or maybe they came from a home of quote tough love. And so now they want to do that. And there's a time and place for everything, but I've just never seen anybody get better by being bullied into being better. I've never seen that work out, where someone just berated somebody so much that all of a sudden they became a better person or a better student.
Right.
I've never seen that work.
Yeah. I think, passing on what either we overcompensate and then or we just kind of repeat that behavior. But, so just to give you a context of where we are in India, is that we are a country that adores academic achievement, right? Because by not having, because there's a big problem of illiteracy in our country, and that's a fact, right? And in many cases, for a girl child or even an underprivileged child to get out of that trap, is the route is seen as education. Now, of course, it may be valid, it may help, and it might be right for a few children. But under the guise of that, there's so many kids who are just going to a building called a school and learning absolutely nothing. So they might get they might finish the 10th or the 9th or the 11th, but they know nothing or next to nothing. But then you have this one person who tops the rank in the state board, and they are held up as, wow, this kid did. But in reality, breaking the trap, because you see people in the cities, or you have people who are, workers who work at home staff, or they're carpenters. And anyway, so the professions there are certain professions which are valued, right? Whether it's engineer, whether it's doctor, whether it's lawyer, whether it's certain kinds of that particular title that is appreciated. But things like plumber, things like carpenter, things like driver, they're seen as, I wouldn't just say blue collar, I would see these are mean jobs that don't deserve respect. So as a result, even in the education system, for the underprivileged child or the girl child, it's only certain jobs which if they don't get, are not seen as worth taking. So what it creates is a disparity in society, right? Where they're not able to break that trap because they can't get the jobs that are seen as chartered accountant. So the education system teaches them next to nothing about valuing their skills, but it's this inherent desperation that if I don't get that, I'm nobody, right? I'm glossing over a lot of details, which maybe a lot of people are horrified right now. Going, how can you portray India in this light? And I'm not portraying any light. I'm just telling you from what my opinions are. But what I wanted to ask you, and there's a reason I went about this circuitous route to come to this point, is how do you, the two things. Now, can you envision a future where when someone says, I don't have an undergraduate degree, I don't have a master's degree, but they're still valued because of what they've done? And secondly, how do you introduce a system, because you are doing this through your program, whatever it takes, giving teenagers, empowering teenagers to pursue their ideas. So how do you, or how would you approach, like in India, where you have people who don't have the resources, you have people who are, of course, set back by virtue of where they were born or to whom they were born to. How do you tell these people, you might not have a degree, you might not have a bachelor's in arts or science, but you can develop skills and still be valued, still be respected, and still make a life for yourself? I don't know if I made any
Well,
sense.
I think, of course, I can imagine a world where people are valued if they don't have an undergraduate degree, because they already are. I mean, while I don't think Mark Zuckerberg is any hero in my mind, or anybody who I would aspire to be like, or want any of my kids to be like, I don't believe he graduated college. I think he dropped out. I think there's plenty of people that are successful, in quotes, entrepreneurs and multimillionaires or even billionaires that didn't go to college. So, and they're already, people value them and they listen to them and they give them their money and they are fine with how they're running things. So that's already happening. It's just not happening everywhere. Right. So we already have proof that people will value you if you don't have an education that's typical, but as long as you go off and you make a lot of money. So that's a big component to it, right? Like if you make millions of dollars, who can push back on you and say, but you didn't get a degree?
It always comes out there, right? Like the Bill Gates and the Elon Musks, like, oh, I was a crappy student, or I didn't graduate, and then they all get an applause on the talk show because wow.
Oh yeah, I know. Or they get some honorary degree from something, like whatever. I mean, that's always going to exist, and so fine.
Yeah.
But I think there are a couple things. I think that we should do a better job on valuing the trades, like having teaching, like having trade schools and things like that. I mean, plumbers make a lot of money in the United States, like in certain places. Like I have a friend whose ex-husband ran a big plumbing company and like did very, very well for himself and has a beautiful home on the beach. So, I mean, people might go, oh, but he's a plumber. I mean, whatever. That's other people's stuff, right? That's other people's judgments and opinions on things like that.
But
that's
also,
the United
just to
States.
add to that, Sarah, sorry for interrupting, is what we don't get, and I'm saying this here in India, to take what you said in context to in India, if you don't have good plumbing, you can have the best sort of resort, but if you have clogged plumbing or bad plumbing, it's going to destroy everything you've built, and that's what people don't appreciate, right? People look at that. Now there's a thing in Goa, which is a state on the western coast, and everyone's flocking there because we can work hybrid models, sit on the beach, sit on the shack, be on our computer. It's got the worst plumbing. It smells of sewage everywhere. So people don't appreciate the value. So just to
no, it's true. Like, so these are things that matter. I mean, and I was even on a walk with my neighbor the other day, and she was talking about just like auto mechanics, like how in a certain part of town, like people are making a lot of money because they're really hard to find, people that have like the training. And so that's just at some point, but I can only speak to the United States. I can't speak to other countries.
Of course. Yeah. That's why I interrupted, just to give you an
like
idea.
Just different, like even class systems and things like that are layered, but in the United States, I think that people still turn their nose up at certain jobs for sure. But then if they find out that you make a lot of money, or you have a certain type of car, or you live in a certain zip code, all of a sudden they're like, maybe I'm willing to give that some consideration. So that for sure happens. And this idea though, of like thinking that we have to wait around though for people to approve of us, that's a whole other layer of conversation, right? Because that's just not a valuable use of our time. If we're sitting around waiting to get societal approval of how we've chosen to live our life, or provide for our families, or use our different gifts and talents, I don't think that's a good use of our short time on this planet. But that's a hard thing to learn, that level of like self-acceptance or self-value and self-worth that's not connected to typical societal standards and expectations. And I also want to say, even in the United States, I do see in some ways a really important role of education in some families, where you get people where someone's going to be the first person of their family to go to a university or graduate from college. Like I work with a lot of first gen kids, and I respect that journey. And I really appreciate why those parents, when I will have a conversation with them, like, well, I mean, he doesn't have to, he's already got this skill, or he can go do that. And they're like, no, he is going to college and he's graduating. He's the first one. Like, we've sacrificed this, we've sacrificed that. He's going. And
that's a different kind of symbolism.
Really, I can't push back on that. I mean, I can push back on that, but I can't, that's not my story. That wasn't my experience. And so
Yeah.
if somebody values that and knows that things, or believes very strongly that things will be better for their child, that's their version of being a great parent. Now, I do know that there's a big burden. I mean, that's, as like I said, I work with first gen kids. They feel a lot of pressure
Yeah.
to then also get the right job that will then be able to support the family, not just them. Now that's like, okay, they're going to college for the family.
Ooh,
Their job is for the family. You know, they're the first one. They're the example. That's a lot of pressure. Maybe it's a great way to feel a sense of honor and pride in your family. I don't know. That wasn't my experience, but I think that pursuing higher ed is important for some people for sure. But I do think as we go along and like 20 years from now, it'll be a different story. I think that I don't know if people are going to value that degree as much, just because I don't really know if colleges are earning that high six-figure tuition. I mean, are they really earning that? Is it worth that when you graduate in 4 years? Have you really received a fair amount? Like, has the exchange been equal and fair? You paid this much money a year, $50K a year. Did you really get $50K worth of education and experiences and opportunities? Was it worth it? I think that's going to be
examined
to explore.
Yeah, and that's a strange thing, right? I'm not even saying, and what you made a valid point. Like there are a lot of children entering college, university, the first in their family, and that's a big thing in India as well, which is happening. But then you have the run of the mill, right? Like everyone has to get, you finish your 12th, that's your high school. Then you get into, here the 12th is also considered as college, the 11th and 12th. So then they go for the bachelor's, then they get a master, then they have to get an MBA. Once they get the MBA, like, I've arrived, and they just join an IT job. And but the point is, the learning is not at all appreciated. It's just until you reach that finish line, whatever it takes. Then you get these things where you display on your resume, you get these abbreviations that you can put on a piece of paper. That's pretty much all these things are. But if you can actually value, like, in your workshop in engineering, how to build, and there are a few people, and I'm not undermining what they've done, but it's so important to, like, I would love to, if I can, build a chair or know how to fix stuff at home, because I didn't, I don't know whether it was not given enough importance, but there is a beauty in trade and craft, right? But when you let's get to this, because this is the important part, and I sorry if I've taken long to get to it, but with whatever it takes, that's your initiative, and the way you run the projects is, when it comes to each child, how do you approach each project, each child's dream or idea, or each teenager's thing? Because it's so vast, it's so unique, and each has potential that you have to identify. So what is the rationale behind whatever it takes, and how do you execute your the program?
So for those that are listening that may not know, so it's WIT Whatever It Takes, and it's a nonprofit organization, and we work with tweens and teens around the world to help them design and launch social impact projects, businesses, nonprofits. It's a range, because it depends on how long you stay in the program. So you might stay in the program for 6 months, or you might stay in the program for 4 years. And so you just get to continue to build on what you're doing or iterate your ideas, or you come into WIT and you take one of our classes, our programs, and you activate your entrepreneurial mindset. You get to execute on an idea that you have, but you might realize entrepreneurship isn't for me, but I've learned a lot about how to work hard and be brave and taking turning my idea into reality. And I've learned how to do public speaking, and I've learned some basic finance. So I'm good, and I'm going to go off and try other activities while I'm in high school. But then there's some teens that stay with us for years through high school, because they want to keep building out these ideas that they have, these business ideas that they have, or nonprofit ideas. And when it comes to, as we say, doing WIT in quotes, so doing whatever it takes, the idea is turning something that you enjoy doing. So it's a really simple exercise. The listener can do this, even if you already have a job. Like, just play along with me. The idea would be to list 3 things that you enjoy doing. And how we present it to our teens is like 3 things that you enjoy doing that you wish you could do instead of homework. Like, what's the thing that your parents have to say to you? Stop and go do your homework.
Let's change homework with job.
Yeah, exactly. Your job. Like, if you didn't have to go to your job, like, what would you be doing? And what's something that you like to come home and do, or do on the weekends, or do with your friends? And sometimes what will happen is a teen, you can tell, doesn't want to say the first answer because they think it's a bad answer. They think it's wrong. Because they think if they say playing video games or watching YouTube or playing basketball, that we'll say, well, that's stupid, right? But that's because they're so used to the system, right? That like it's going to tell them something's wrong. And that's not how we work. So we just say, write it all down. Maybe you like to cook. Maybe you like to watch cooking videos. Maybe you like to, your grandmother teaches you how to sew on the weekends or on Sundays, and you really like that. So we have them write down 3 things that they enjoy doing. And then we have them write down 3 causes that they care about. 3 things that if they were given, and we'll tell the kids, and this can even go for the listener, if you were given $1,000 and you could make a donation to an organization or an investment in an organization, but mostly let's go donation.
Yeah.
What would it be? Would it be to 1? Would it be to 2? Would it be to 3? And you don't have to know the exact names, but it would sound like, well, I really care about dogs that are in kill shelters, or I really care about kids that are homeless, or I really care about this animal that's going extinct. So we just say, like, write that down. Like, so you're basically just trying to identify things that you like, causes that you care about and things that you enjoy doing. And then through our program, we help them marry one thing that they care about and one thing that they enjoy doing and turn it into a business that has a social impact. And that's looked like kids launching jewelry lines that then have a give back component to, like, we've got one girl, her name's Ariella, and she has a bracelet company called Lulu's Bracelets. And she gives 50% of her proceeds go to providing young kids emotional support therapy dogs to come to the hospital or to a children's center. And that's because her dogs bring her a lot of joy and help her a lot. And they sit with her sometimes when she's making her bracelets, and she feels like kids should have that experience too, that maybe want to feel less alone and have a little animal with them. And so she makes her bracelets. She sells her bracelets online and in a store. And she's had to learn how to talk on TV about her company. She's had to learn how to make a budget, which was like hard for her at first. She didn't quite understand that there was expenses when she had to buy her beads, like that they were going to cost money. And so but the basic thing is, it's like, you don't have to create something massive at WIT. I mean, we're not about something, where someone would say, like, I'm going to create something that ends homelessness. We wouldn't believe that that's actually true, because homelessness is layered. So we're really big about helping a young person create a very simple idea that can be easily executed, because a lot of people, even adults, never execute on their ideas because they've made them so complicated, and they get just stuck in just how complicated they've made it. And so we try to teach young people how to kiss, keep it super simple. And of course they giggle when we say kiss because they're teenagers.
I almost did. Yeah.
Yes. Right? Everybody does. And we say, keep it super simple. Yeah. And we remind them, you go to school, you have homework, you want to hang out with your friends, you watch Netflix, you've got things going on. So create a business, create a side hustle, create a movement that you actually can work on and you can execute. And I say the same advice to adults too, who want to create a side hustle of any kind.
And I know many other adults would have giggled when you said kiss as well. So it's not a problem.
I know.
The beautiful part is it made me smile when I heard of her bracelet project, because we've all had some similar, ideas or these interesting thoughts, but it was always shot down. Like, that's stupid. It's not going to make you any money. And translated that to today's thing, when someone is an entrepreneur starting up in their 20s, because startups is another big thing in India, and everyone's like, that's not going to be the next unicorn, or that's not going to. So right, it's always these, yeah. But what is interesting is for your for the girl who's making the bracelets, she enjoys it, and it's something that is giving her the pleasure of understanding budgeting, understanding supply, understanding demand. But imagine if you're that person who did what I said, right? Who's done the entire chain of events that finally culminated in the MBA, and now they're going to have a startup pitch, and everything around them is, oh, are you in a Kickstarter program? Are you in an accelerator program? Are you in an incubator program? Are you going to go on Shark Tank? Are you going to go 5-minute elevator pitch to investors, to venture capital? It just seems so 0 to 1,000, right? Where if it's a small idea, it's like, when you're going to get your funding. Because my wife has a startup, and I overhear the way she talks about it. Unfortunately, she's got backing, like, the support, like the way her dad advises her. Advises her very, very healthy, right? Like the way he talks about it. It's not about, because she enjoys it. But that's 1 in a million, because everyone else has to go to these big meets and get all these intimidating terms thrown at them, or these things. And it's just such a daunting task. But if it was done the way you said for this girl, like, she's come into this 20s with 10 businesses which have already succeeded in their own way, right? That's
amazing. Really important.
Yeah.
We want them to just have the experiences, and we want them to fail. We want them to struggle, and they will, but they do it in a way that there's not a whole lot at stake. I mean, it's much easier to take risks at 12 years old, 14 years old than at 40 and 50 when you have a mortgage or kids or a partner that's saying, well, if you do that, like, how's that going to impact our savings? And when we teach them young and we give them access to opportunities like this, it helps them develop lifelong skills, a lifelong skill set. That's why I say these things can easily be taught in school. They can easily be incorporated into the school system until they are. I mean, WIT will exist, but ideally WIT goes out of business because schools will just develop and incorporate entrepreneurial education, entrepreneurial mindset into their everyday school programs.
And then you'll have the CEO of the school who gets the most money, and then every parent's like, oh, I want my child to be the CEO of the school.
Well, we do talk about that, right? We try to teach our young people that you do have skills, you have a skill set, and leadership can look different for you. I mean, it's not every leader isn't an extrovert. There are leaders that are introverts. Not every leader wants to be on TV. Some don't lead in that way. And we just want to show them, because something that we do at WIT is every week we bring in a different CEO, entrepreneur, celebrity, influencer on our Zoom, and we call it a WIT hangout, and they talk to our kids about their experience. I interview them, and then the kids get a chance to chat with them. And it's really helpful because they get to see and hear different types of leadership for different types of companies, and realize, oh, that could be me, or I wouldn't want to do that, or that's interesting. So that we're not just giving them one version of what leadership is. I joke with my friend group, I don't like that language, like girl boss, or whatever that is. That's not me. I don't like that kind of stuff where it's like, I don't know why we use that kind of language, or this, like, it's almost like cultish, this thing. And then a girl thinks, well, that's what I got to be. I got to be a girl boss. And it's like, no, you can just be a woman who leads and makes the world a better place in your own way. You could be a wonderful leader in your home. You could be a wonderful leader at school, maybe in a business, but boss babe type stuff, or
that comes with that language. Power suit and wearing these clothes, and I'm like, it's
fine if it's authentic for you. If anything's authentic for you, I say go for it. That's why
but it narrows it down for a lot of people, right? Because they might want to just chill, and leading doesn't have to be aggressive. I think many people think it has to,
I agree. I think and for both men and women, it can, it doesn't have to be a certain, like, they're yelling in your face in 30-second videos on Instagram, telling you to get up at 4 a.m. and jump into a cold plunge. I think that can be valuable to get up early, for sure.
Yeah.
I think cold plunges and cold showers are good. I mean, they have helped me. I think that that's helpful, but this whole thing, like, you have to live a certain way and do a level of, like, burnout, because that means that you're a great leader. If you're burning out, like, if you're just like the hustle culture, it's not healthy. So we don't teach that to our young people.
And the people are burning out, like the ones who are the so-called leaders are dropping in their 40s and 50s. So clearly
Yep,
they're doing
they
the
sure
right.
are.
Yeah,
So
making some space for us.
yeah, well, I'm like, that's not good, right? Like,
That's not good. Yeah. I mean, sorry
that's
about
not
the
what
joke.
we want young people. But like, it's like when young people are looking up to that, I'm like, no, don't look up to that. Like,
Don't.
that's not a
Yeah.
good look. It's wonderful um, to love your partner when you're older. And maybe if you want to have a family. And if you want to have a business that still allows you to have time with your family, that's great too. Like,
Yeah.
where are our priorities as a society? And are they
Yeah.
good?
Yeah, and the weird thing is, like, for a kid growing up now, looking at the pattern of people who are falling ill and getting all these heart-related diseases, and you look at them as these CEOs or these CFOs, and next thing they grow up thinking, oh, what's the most dangerous place for a CEO? Oh, the treadmill. I shouldn't go there. And you'd find this surprising, like in not surprising, maybe it's a fact, but in America as well. But in Bangalore, where I live, a lot of the schools now are either being started or being bought over by real estate companies, because that's a place to siphon off black money and convert that into legal taxable money.
Wow.
So can you imagine
that's
that
a whole
system?
other podcast.
Exactly. Imagine that system. Of course, again, I don't make a blanket statement saying all schools, but if they don't really, if they're not directly owned by them, they're getting funding from them, or there's some connection there. And imagine that kind of industry having control over education.
Yeah. I mean, there are people that are controlling our education system here in the States, and that's not good.
So yeah, I'm so glad that I think we definitely should talk about this on another episode, because I think there are a lot of things that are changing, and I want to know more about that. But I think whatever it takes is something that is so cool. And just me now sitting, I'm 40, and I'm like, I wish I had that, because you kind of a lot of the stuff that you are eager to kind of express, even in your early 20s, or even now people in their 60s are kind of they're kind of quashed, because they're like, that's stupid, you can't do that as a man, or that's not going to get you anywhere, or that's not respectable. And like, I'll give you an example before we wind up. Like, my cousin, her son's 17, 18, and they live in Switzerland. And in Switzerland, you have the option of either going to university or taking a vocational route. That's where you basically apprentice with someone in the field you've chosen, and then you get to do, I think, 1 or 2 days in the week. You get to go to the theoretical, the technical school, and learn more about that trade. And the moment he decided to do the vocational part, everyone's saying, but where will you be? It's so limiting. In 15 years, you'll still be that person. I'm like, and in my head going, take a step back. What is actually wrong with that? And and I'm not saying what you're doing is that, but I think to appreciate each story for what it is, each human experience for what it is something we're forgetting to do, because we want to create this collective of people that all resemble each other and who are vying for this position of CEO or manager or managing director, or the same 10 positions, which are never going to be enough, right?
Yeah. And I think we are trying to we're perpetuating a lie to our young people, saying that if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to have a great life. It's not true. Is that if you get, a perfect score in your SATs and you get into that dream school, okay, doesn't give you that, you don't get like a pass on life and the hardships of life just because you somehow got these certain things you can check off your list, like got into the best school, got the best internship, got the thing. I mean, I've worked with kids that have checked those boxes, and I've sat with them over coffee and they're miserable. And the reason that they're miserable is because they're so confused why they're not happy, because they said, I did the thing. I did the thing that my parents told me. I did the thing that my prep school told me to do. I got into the school. I got the job. I got the internship. I made this, certain salary, and I'm not happy. And then I just look at them and I go, welcome to the real work, right? Like, because the real work is the realization that those things aren't what make you happy, that you've got to learn to be somebody that you want to be around, that you like, that you're living a life on your terms. It's not easy to do. Very few people do it, do that kind of work. A lot of people are just going through life, doing what they think they're supposed to do and numbing out with different things. And so I do know that as adults, we can do better, and we should do better by kids, and reminding them that life is not linear. There's lots of twists and turns, and there's lots of setbacks, and there's lots of things that aren't going to go your way, and you can be as good as you possibly can, and you're still not going to be spared heartbreak and heartache and, being let go from your job.
Yeah. And if you don't know cursive writing, you're not going to get a Valentine date.
Yeah, exactly.
No, because so many kids are told that goal, that you have to, and they have the eye on the goal for so long, they forget to look at themselves and see what they look like, which is so sad.
Yeah, but parents and adults aren't inviting that.
Yeah.
We talk to our kids, like we have kids, especially our kids from India, I'm just saying, they'll say like, I got an A-, and my parents were like, why didn't you get an A?
Yeah.
And that's a real thing. And we had one of my WIT graduates come, he's Indian. He came back to WIT to speak. And there were a lot of Indian kids on the call, on the hangout.
Yeah.
And he just said, and he didn't go to college. And he's like, yeah, and all of you on here, like, that's a big deal in our families. And they're like, yeah, oh my God, what did your mom and dad say? Yeah. Well, now he's gone on to be very successful monetarily and successful in terms of he's a happy, content person in the work that he's chosen to do. But that was a big deal for him he went to a private prep school, high school, and he did not go to college. And so there's also like a lot of adults are perpetuating the lie to the kids that you've got to do something. It's also because they don't know another way, because they didn't do it another way either. And if you were to ask them, well, are you truly happy? No. I think you'd be surprised by some of the answers that the adults would give.
And they're not, and that's the thing. Like I have so many people in my family who've moved to America. They went for their masters and then they got that job. They lived that so-called quote unquote American dream, and they live in the suburbs. They got a big house. So their kids obviously had this pressure of going to these top schools, right? Whether it was private school or public school, but then they went to these area codes where the schools accordingly were good. And then they put them in these programs. In fact, their undergraduate program was already decided. They got into maybe Ivy League, or they got into the universities. And now many of them are scratching their heads, the family members and their kids going, what's happening?
Yeah.
Literally, what's happening?
Everybody scratches their head at some point. We all should. That's life and being alive. And we should always be reevaluating, and assessing if the choices that we're making today are the choices that are leading us to like the life that we want to live tomorrow. I think it's an important thing to be doing.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that people like you are running programs and organizations, helping, the future generations and young adults and young people to, I think, just live life and enjoy their experience as human beings, and doing whatever it takes. Thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And do stay in touch, and good luck with everything coming along your way.
Thank you.